Fisherman's Post. More fish, more often.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This is a special travel episode titled Flats Fish in the Keys for Bonefish and Cudas, and we're going to be featuring Captain Rob Koraly of Sandbar Safari Charters. And Rob was going to walk us through what to expect and what you can learn from a day on his boat down in the Keys. Spends 10 months up here in Swansboro, 2 months or so down there in the Keys. And he's going to walk us through bonefish and cudas on the flats in the Keys. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post, and Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community of North Carolina since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and here in our latest and greatest effort, the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series, where we reach out to our captain and guide friends and ask them to share with us their knowledge, their insights on how to catch more fish more often, albeit the bigger goal is not just catching more fish, but getting you and your family and friends out on the water, spending more time together more often. And in this pursuit, I'm joined by my podcast partner, Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative. Billy, welcome to one of our special travel podcast episodes, man.
What's up, Gary? I'm excited about this one, man. Bonefish in the Keys. Maybe you can ask a couple fly fishing questions if you're so kind.
I bet your fly comes up. I bet you, even without prompting, I bet you Rob mentions the magic wand.
Yeah, I bet you can't talk about bonefish without fly fishing. So awesome, man. Well, good to see you, Gary. You're looking good. Got some internet problems worked out here, so feeling happy.
Fingers crossed, brother. Fingers
crossed. We'll see what happens. All right. Well, we want to thank our sponsors real quick before we jump into this episode. We got Marine Warehouse Center and Bland Landscaping Co. So I'm going to jump over here to Bland Landscaping Company real quick. As you can see on the screen, if you're watching, they were established in 1976, long-term company. They're looking for some career-minded people to come work for them, man or woman who is passionate about working outdoors. Wake up early, get off early, go spend time with your family and your friends. They reached out to us, Gary. They are big outdoorsmen and people who really believe in family and have a lot of benefits to work there. So go to blandlandscaping.com/careers and you can sign up see what they got in the area. They're all over North Carolina, so a lot of locations there.
Yeah, man, I like the approach. I mean, I like that they're career-minded. I like their get up early, get off early. Man, I like what they're selling, man. I like what they're offering, not selling. Yeah. I hope the podcast serves them. I hope we help them get some quality people.
Yeah, and if you don't need a career, maybe you need some landscaping done or some building. I mean, they do a lot of stuff. Go check out their website, Bland Landscaping Co. And now I want to shout out Marine Warehouse Center, our longest sponsor. Super excited to have them here in 2022. So I get a quick word from them. We'll be right back.
At Marine Warehouse, we have everything. We have new boats, we have parts, we have accessories, new trailers, we have a complete service department with highly trained technicians. Anything you need to get out on the water, we have it.
At Marine Warehouse Center, as we've grown over the last few years, now have a large selection of marine supplies from start to finish for all your boating needs.
What I love about this region is to be able to get out on the water, and also we love to be able to get you out on the water.
The best part of working at Marine Warehouse is being able to get involved with the customers and share a love for the water.
All right. Good guys, man. I had a lot of fun when we just did the end of the year episode not too long ago with Emmett. Man, he's a blast. Always fun.
Man, he's a great fit. He's a great fit for this podcast. Marine Warehouse is a great fit for this podcast, and it makes even Terrell. It makes it easier to stomach Terrell's weekly jokes. Again, he seems to be more in the realm of boat jokes instead of fish jokes, and I've got one of Terrell's jokes handy if you're ready.
I'm ready for it when you are, Gary.
Okay, again, this is Terrell's joke, not mine.
Sure.
How do you make luxury yachts look younger?
No idea.
Well, you use Botox.
All right. That's pretty good. I bet there's a lot of people on luxury yachts that are using Botox. Botox.
I bet there are.
Well, Gary, I'm going to show you a fish picture real quick, man. Unless you got more Terrell jokes.
No, that's it.
All right. I'm going to jump to a fish picture real quick. We got Jake Bangle from Oak Island. Caught this mahi on a ballyhoo while fishing the Gulf Stream out of Oak Island. Really good fishing. Really good looking fish there. That's a beautiful, beautiful fish. So thanks for submitting that. And be sure, if you're watching or listening to the show and you want us to take a look at your picture, and it might have a chance, send it over. And we'll tag Gary or Fisherman's Post in it on Instagram, or send it. Where do they send it at? Photos at Fisherman's Post? Is that where?
Photos at fishermanspost.com.
Yeah, and who knows where it'll end up? Maybe here, the website, the the paper, anywhere is possible.
We never complain about getting too many fish photos. Never.
That's right, man. Never complain about too many fish photos or too many sponsors or too many coffees. So if you want to sponsor the show, reach out to me, Billy at fishermanspost.com. Or if you want to buy Gary a coffee, look at him. He's looking pretty sleepy. So go to buymeacoffee.com/fishermanspost, and you can support us if you enjoy the content. We really appreciate everyone watching and listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button or that follow button wherever you listen or watch. So I think that's it, Gary. I think it's all I got for you, man.
I think that's good. I think that's a good setup. And before I introduce Rob and have a conversation with him about a day on his boat, as I do, my reminder to you for Billy's best takeaway. Billy's best takeaway, flats fishing the Keys.
I'm excited, Gary, and hopefully it's about fly fishing. Just put that out there one more time.
All right. Well, at this time, I will welcome back to the show, Captain Rob Koraly, Sandbar Safari Charters out of the Swansboro, Emerald Isle area. But tonight we're talking about your 2-month or so gig down in the Keys. Welcome back to the show, Rob.
Gary, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Billy, good talking to you guys again.
Yeah, man, we always enjoy having you on the show. You're a fantastic guest. But since you've been on the show a couple of times already, that before we can talk about flats fishing the Keys for bonefish and cudas, as is tradition, we've got 2 questions for you. Are you ready for question number 1, Captain Rob?
Shoot.
So why should we listen to what you have to say about a bonefish or a barracuda? Why?
I've been going down to the Keys for 6 seasons now, and primarily spending all of my time in the shallows and in the backwaters. So that's pretty much what we're targeting in there for most of the time we're down there. Usually January, February, March, April is the time frame. I've been down there March and April primarily, and do a little bit of fishing back here, but have a lot of fun down there, and we can see them, we can catch them. It's a lot of fun sight fishing those flats.
Well, right on, man. That one goes through. And then for question number 2, as is tradition, is typically a non-fishing related question. I play off of bonefish. Since you like bonefish, I'm sure you eat at Bonefish Grill all the time. My question is about Bonefish Grill. Are you ready?
All right, fire away.
So I'm going to give you 4 menu items from the Bonefish Grill. Only 3 of them are actual. 3 of them are actual. 1 is made up. Which is the made up starter menu item? Bang Bang Shrimp, Mussels Josephine, Lobster and Ginger Pot Stickers, or Tempura Crunch Sashimi Tuna?
It's got to be the Josephine, but I'll take all 4 of them. That's fine.
Well, one of them's fictitious. Which one did I make up?
The Josephine, Mussels Josephine or something. That's not real.
Actually, I'm actually having a moment of self-doubt. I think I made up the lobster and ginger pot stickers because it was like a month ago that I made this up. We keep on having issues with connectivity. I keep on having issues with connectivity. I'm pretty sure Mussels Josephine was on that. But, maybe Billy can look up while we get to talking about bonefish and cudas. So, again, the concept Rob,
you don't want to make any appetizers with bonefish or cudas. Wouldn't be really recommended.
Deal. We won't have a recipe feature at the end. But what I am interested in is you sharing with us basically what a day on your boat would be like down in the Keys, targeting the flats, fishing for a day, half day, 3/4 of a day. So I guess for starters, where would I meet you? Like if I was down there and I had booked you, where would we meet up?
There's a marina nearby where I dock the boat. It's Joe Gardens Marina, and typically we leave from there. And I can pick clients up at various places where they're at or marinas near them if they're not staying in Cudjoe. Basically, can fish from Marathon down to Key West for anything that we're doing and everywhere in between. So we're pretty mobile on pickups, but generally Cudjoe Gardens Marina is where we'll leave from.
And so, what is the boat that I'm getting on, man? What do you trailer down there?
Take my 22-foot Bay Rider. It works fine as a flats boat. We fish a lot of skinny water, and on pretty days we'll fish the patch reefs. But it does just fine down there. And so 22-foot Bay Rider, same boat I fish here in North Carolina.
And ideally, I would get on the boat with one other person, two other people, by myself. Like, what's the ideal experience?
Well, that's really up to you. The nice thing about the Bay Rider is I've got plenty of room. And if we have to do some technical fishing, we can take turns. Everybody else can chill. So you can have, 4 people. I base my charters to a limit of 4 people. And that's something kind of unique about us is we've always got room for 4 on that Bay Rider. And a lot of charters will only cater to 2 clients because it's just spatial concerns on a lot of flats boats, technical skiffs, and even smaller bay boats are just tricky to have 4 anglers on. So we're not all fishing at once. Usually 2 people can fish at once, and that makes the most sense for flats fishing. But we can take up to 4 with no problem.
And so, what's the standard instructions you give me, before I show up? Like, make sure you bring what, or make sure you're ready in what way? Like, how do you advise your clients?
Down there, the sun is definitely the enemy. So you want to make sure you're got your sunblock and your protective clothing, hats, all that jazz, and plenty of hydration, plenty of water. And aside from that, a good pair of polarized glasses, because that's going to be key if you're sight fishing. Those would be the most important pieces of gear. We don't get a lot of rain down there that time of year in the spring and late winter, but occasionally we do. So, rain jacket, but the typical stuff you'd take fishing, but really want the sun protection and the polarized glasses. If you don't bring anything else, bring your zinc and your polarized shades.
So when we're pulling away, um, what are the variables that you're going through to decide where we're going to look first? I mean, again, certainly not asking for the Google map and point for locations, but I'm guessing there's different terrain, whether it's wind or I mean tide. I mean, I'm not really sure down there. So how is it that you're going to make up your mind where we're going to target first?
The first thing we're going to be looking at is wind, what direction and how strong it is. March can be pretty windy down there. It's their windiest month typically. You got a lot of 15 to 25 mile an hour blows. And the good thing about the middle lower keys where we're at, there's a lot of islands, Big Pine Key, all these big long keys that protect the wind on the east and west sides. And then the main island chain will also block the wind from the north and south. So you've kind of got 4 directions of wind blockage in that lower keys area. If you find the right places to be, you can always find a flat out of the wind. So that's a nice thing, and you can cut through and around a lot of the backwater channels and mangrove creeks and stuff on the skinny water boats. So it's no problem getting around even on windier days. But that's probably our main variable when we're making our plan on which flats to fish or how we're going to approach any given flat, or what our game plan is going to be for while we're fishing that day is the wind direction.
Man, so I mean, of course it changes depending on the wind and where we're going, but a typical run, duration wise, time wise, before we're starting to cast, before we're starting to look for fish, is what on a trip like this?
It's really nice because we can go out on the front side, the Atlantic side, and be on good flats for Cudas, Bonefish, permit, and other stuff in 5 to 10 minutes. We can run 20 to 30 minutes to, just about as much range as we want to on that side. And then on the back side, we've got about a 10 to 15-minute run to get around to some of the flats over there on the Gulf side of Cudjoe Key. and those areas, and there's really good fishing there, especially on the bonefish. And then further off is the bigger barracudas, so that's maybe another 30 minutes. So 45-minute run tops to anywhere that we're going to be fishing is usually the case. But you can start catching smaller cudas and have shots of bonefish 5 minutes from the marina.
Man, so help me understand the dynamics of the flats down there. Like, what makes a flat good for bonefish? What makes a flat good for permit or, tarpon or barracuda? Like, aside from picking a flat that is out of the wind, what do you like in a flat? What's important? What is it that holds the fish that works for you?
Food is the next biggest variable for me when I'm picking which flats to fish there. I usually want to see some the waters when the water's clear. You see any kind of disturbance on the bottom in the form of the white silty mud that's down there. You'll see schools of mullet in 2 to 3 foot of water, large schools of them, and you just see a big shiny cloud of mud, and that's, I mean, it might be a half-mile wide in some cases, but the mud always kind of gives you an indication on where the bait is, or if there's some mangrove islands nearby. And looking around the edges of those, you see a lot of pilchards and smaller bait fish. That could be a good indication that the flats surrounding it are going to be holding fish. So you got to have good food, good food source for the fish to be there, and for that flat to be lively. You want to see some life. You want to see some needlefish jumping around. You want to see some mullets mudding up. You want to see some crashes, birds, pelicans. A lot of times, if I'm fishing a flat and I have open line of sight to places that are 2-3 miles away in the backwaters and see birds diving, we might just pick up and run right then and go check that out, because that'll usually give an indication of the bait being on that flat. And it doesn't like staying in that open water long, because once the fish find it, they obliterate it. So we're always looking for signs of bait fish, and you can do that by looking at the islands surrounding the flats, looking for bird activity, and looking for fish activity as well.
So do some flats just historically typically hold the bait better? There's something about them that's just more organic to holding bait, or any flat can be the flat on any given day?
To an extent, there's some that have boat traffic issues where there's people running by daily, and that'll sort of push fish further away. Usually, the further you get from any of that kind of traffic, the more life you're going to find. But I think it changes over different times of year when the water temperatures really swing. But the uh, cooler times during the winter, when those temperatures are down some, and when you're still getting some fronts coming through in March, and even into early April, the places that are holding bait are the places that can during the winter time, during those colder months. So they're pretty habitual to some of the same areas where the last of the bait fish and pilchards are until they leave. A lot of places year after year, certain flats in certain areas will produce better than others. I think it's just because the bait migrates along that path adjacent to those flats and over those flats more often than it does in other areas, because of the water temperatures mostly.
So, and these flats, I mean, are we talking typically, what is it, 2 to 3 feet on average, and wide expanse of flats, like, for acres and acres? And then I guess I'd also sort of tack on, are you experiencing tides down there like we're used to experiencing up here in North Carolina?
No, tides are very different there. There are a lot of wind-based and current-based tides there. The range of tide is a lot smaller there than it is here. It can be only a few inches on some days, half a foot, and it's a lot less predictable. Well, not, I'd say it's less consistent. You have a lot less consistent tides than you do back here in our area of North Carolina. And so that's a little bit challenging, because finding the parts of the flats that are productive can be very tidal based. Actually, which part of the flat you want to be on and approach and fish. And something that can happen down there really easily is if you don't approach a flat right, with the way that you're fishing it with the wind, where you're starting on the flat and where you're finishing, what section of that flat you're working over based on the depth. If you mess it up, a lot of times you can kind of blow your shot at fishing that whole area in 300-yard radius, because the fish can be that keen. They'll push off the channels and clear that flat, and then it's kind of done. So that comes with just knowing a flat the same way you would know a bay or a creek, just every nook and cranny of it, so that when you get there and see where the water level's at, you kind of have an idea which way to go.
Well, man, that's probably a good segue into, all right, we're pulling up to the first flat, and so I mean, I guess what can you share about the best way to sort of pull up to a flat to start? What I'm guessing, what is it? Your first wind drift, or are we pulling around? I mean, I love this concept. I'm really looking forward to what comes next.
I don't like using the trolling motor unless I have to. The trolling motor is really good for a lot of things down there. Working across the flat, it's not the best. I like to pole and drift. When you have the more wind you have, the less likely you're going to want to drift with the wind. The more likely you're going to need to pole into the wind, because if you have a light wind to no wind, you can usually drift with the current or the light wind at a good fishing and sighting pace. If it's over 15 miles an hour, you're probably going to be drifting too fast, to where even if you stop the boat with the pole or the power pole, you're going to make too much noise. Your shot window on a fish that you see is going to be real quick and fast. If he's moving towards the boat, it's not a good direction. You might not get your shot. And so we're really specifically targeting sight fishing unless the conditions don't allow. So we're trying to approach that flat to move across it the slowest and quietest that we can. So if it's blowing 15 to 20, I'm going to get on the downwind side. Hopefully the current's coming across the flat or straight at us, and not messing us up on our push or making us work too hard to get into the wind, pushing against the current too. But we can push into a 15-knot wind and creep the flat pretty easily. And if you're coming downwind or down current, you just want to be checking the boat up and going at a slow pace. And so that'll sort of determine which side of the flat that we'll come to, or which side we'll approach from. And then the other concern will be where the sun's at. So if we want to have that sun to our back as much as we can, and try to line that up with those drifting or poling conditions that we're trying to create. So we've got good visual and good sight conditions as well.
All right. And so if I were to be fishing with you with a friend, and just to pull a name out of the hat, say Adam Meyer. If Adam Meyer and I were on your boat,
No, I'm going to
fishing
send you
down there
back
in
home.
Kujo
Can't
Key.
bring him. He's not allowed to
And
come.
I guess we're both up in the front of the boat. You're pulling the boat, playing the current, the wind, as we should. And I guess we're looking for bonefish first. Not that barracuda can't happen, but if we're specifically hoping for a bonefish hookup, what is it that you're putting in Adam and I's hands? Like, what are we holding, being ready to cast once we see a target?
If we're spin casting, and especially if the conditions are not too blowy, then we'll be using live shrimp on a little worm hook, and I like to use a 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon leader, a good 2-foot section of leader at least, whatever you can throw off of your rod tip without it impairing the cast. But you want a decent leader length, and you definitely want to use fluorocarbon because the bonefish are spooky. Everything's clear down there, and fluorocarbon is definitely your friend. So we'll rig the shrimp something like this on a worm hook. I know it's hard to see, but it's a weedless worm hook, and he's threaded on there, so he pulls backwards coming through there when you cast it, and that will help the presentation. What we'll do is we'll actually cut that tail off so it's not there, and then the shrimp will look like this on the worm hook. And that's a real stealthy presentation. It casts well, And most importantly, when you retrieve it, you just use a slow hopping retrieve. It pulls naturally and doesn't spin. It looks like a natural shrimp, a natural presentation. And your shrimp doesn't have to be alive for this, but does have to be fresh, or else you're going to make 2 casts and it's going to sling off the hook. So I'm usually using live shrimp, but we're not too concerned with them being alive because we're working the bait to the fish, or working it along into his path and leaving it sit until he comes and finds it, and then waiting for him to bump it and pick it up.
So why are you cutting the tail off?
If you cut the tail, so if you're pulling this bait and the tail's on it, you're pulling this bait backwards, and so that tail is going to impede the natural swimming motion and movement. It's going to make that thing spin. And so if you cut that tail off, it's natural in the presentation. It moves in a straight line. It's just to keep it moving in a straight line. Otherwise, your bait will spin and twist like a soft plastic that's hooked, awkwardly on a jig head. And so that's all about the presentation. You want a really nice, natural, good-looking presentation for them to commit to the bait, and that'll get it done, popping that tail off.
So if we're working our way across the flat, and then what are we likely to see? Like, are you seeing just single bonefish? So are we seeing pairs? I mean, is this ever happening in schools? I know, surprisingly little about bonefish, man. What am I expecting to sight?
Sometimes we'll see singles or pairs, but usually in March and April, the fish are starting to gather up, and they're starting to get happy on those flats. And so we'll usually see, pairs to 2 to 6 fish in a group together, sometimes as many as 15 or 20 of them mudding. Usually if you see a school, you'll see the mud before you see the actual fish. And a lot of times we'll blind cast the shrimp to the edges of the mud before we make the actual fish bodies. You risk spooking the fish on the cast if it lands on his tail of one of them. But at the same time, you can do that from further away because you can see that mud from further away, and you don't have to get the boat too close to them. So it sort of depends on, and in that situation, there's usually multiple fish. So if you spook one of them, you usually have another shot. But singles would like to try to sight cast too, obviously. But usually we're seeing, when we see fish, we're seeing small groups of fish, and then occasionally seeing singles as well. Usually on the Gulf side, I see more groups of fish, a lot of times smaller fish in general. And then on the Atlantic side, we'll see more singles and pairs, and a little bit bigger fish on that side typically.
So when they're mudding, are they on the move? Is that part of my cast? Physics about where I'm putting it, or when they're mudding, they found something of interest, so it's pretty easy to just put it outside the mud.
Yeah, usually they're not moving fast. They're eating mostly all crustaceans off the bottom. So they're sitting there nosing around, and they're not zipping back and forth too much. So wherever you see the mud or activity, and when it's real calm, sometimes you'll see the tail wakes or tail fins actually moving the water around, and it kind of looks like you'd see mullets on the surface here in North Carolina in a creek swimming on a still day. A lot of times you'll see the bonefish doing that too, but they're not moving. They're feeding. They're not moving fast at all. They're sitting in. They're right there where they're at, nosing around. So you're trying to present a bait on the edges of that or past it and work it through those fish or by those fish, and not just trying to not land it on top of them, obviously.
And then is it like is the relationship such that you're telling me where to cast, or we're both making sure I see the mud, and then I throw it out there? Is it kind of like let it sit, and then you tell me when to pop, or you tell me when to bounce it, or you want me to go to work as soon as my bait hits the ground, hits the water?
Well, the bonefish have a real good nose, so they can smell that shrimp. If your cast lands in a decent place, we're on the boat. We're both looking at the same thing. Something that I always try to encourage flats fishermen and sight fishermen, especially, is to not blind cast. At least not towards a cast towards activity or a cast towards a mud isn't a blind cast. Just a cast towards whatever in any direction is a blind cast. So you don't want to be blind casting and miss an opportunity or spook a fish by accident. Down there, if you're blind casting a shrimp around on a jig head like that, a little propel jack or a little snapper or something is going to, or a little shark, something's going to come eat your shrimp. And then you're going to be re-rigging and two bonefish are going to go across the boat 10 yards off the bow and you're going to miss your shot. So focusing on what you're looking for your target, especially when you're bone fishing, you really just need to be looking for and waiting for the opportunity to make the cast, and sight fishing in that way. And so when we see the fish or I see the fish, if you can't see them, I'm just going to give you a direction. You're going to put that cast out. And the first thing you want to do is let it sit for a few seconds, let the ripple go away, let everything be calm. And a lot of times that fish will, if he's not spooked, will investigate that splash if he's close enough, or smell that shrimp if he's close enough, and he'll ease right to it. And you won't have to do anything except just keep your light tension to your rod and your bait and feel for a pickup. And if it's a cast where you're trying to lead a fish that you're looking at and he's moving, you're just going to try to work that cast past the fish and bring it to him, or get it in his path and let him swim over it and find it with his nose. So I'm going to be looking for fish, activity, bodies, and trying to relay that to my anglers that are on the bow that are doing the same thing. And most cases, listening and looking are the best things you can be doing when you're sight fishing. Listen to your guide and look for the fish, and don't take your eyes off of whatever you see, no matter what it is, because it might develop into something that you're looking for if you keep watching it long enough.
And then any advice for me once I have a fish that picks up my shrimp, that I have tension, any mistakes that people make, anything that you want to make sure you do or don't do?
Reel down on the hook set, more so than pulling the rod back. You can do a lot of work with a reel when you're setting the hook on any kind of fish. And so usually when I feel the take or the bump or see it, in some cases we'll see it happen, then you're wanting to feel tension to the rod tip as you start to wind. And then once you feel that tension to the rod tip is there, give it a hook set, and usually he'll instantly respond with a hard long run. And then during the course of that run and the beginning of that run, he'll drive that hook home even further, or pull it if it's not in a good spot. So usually if you've got a bonefish on for the first 10 seconds, you've got him on for the rest of the fight, unless he cuts you off or gets eaten. And you want to have light drag, a strong enough drag to get that hook set and that penetration when he takes off or when you set the hook. But you want to have a light drag because he's going to burn that thing down, and you want him to burn that energy and run that flat, and then be prepared when you're fighting a bonefish to reel really fast. Even when you have tension and he's taking some drag as you're reeling against it, you need to be kind of reeling at a good pace against it and ready to reel faster, because when they do come at the boat, when they do change direction, they go really fast, and you almost have to wind as fast as you can to catch up to them. And if you don't, then that's usually the only time you'll lose a fish, is when he runs at you if you can't catch up to the slack and keep your tension, or get to him before he runs under the boat or around the pole or whatever may happen. But they are very, very fast fish. So, but they've got a strong mouth, but it's not too hard, and they respond well when they feel anything in their mouth to taking off. So usually hook sets work out pretty good, just as long as you wind into it good, more so than snapping back with the rod tip. So is what I would say.
Man, I'm getting excited for this bonefish fishery, but I know I want to talk about barracuda fishing as well. So how does this game change if we're thinking, man, we're going to target some bigger barracuda doing the same kind of flats fishing?
Well, if you really love bonefish, and you hook a couple on a flat, and one of them or two of them are 3 of them get eaten by barracudas, then you'll love catching those barracudas because they've aggravated your bone fishing day. And a lot of times, if you just want to have a really good time and catch a really exciting, fun fish that jumps and gets big, the bonefish are topping out at 5-6 pounds. Most of them are in the 2 to 4 pound range, and so they're not big fish. They run fast. They're fun to catch. They're very exciting to stalk. It's difficult, challenging, but the barracuda fishing is just stupid fun because they're really fast. They're really aggressive. So if you just want to have a good time without having to work super hard for it, the barracuda fishing is really fun. And we've got a lot of places down there in the lower keys where you get out to the Atlantic or Gulf edges where it drops off to the first part of the reef, and you've got 2 to 3 foot of water. They'll be holding 30-40 pound barracudas sometimes. And anybody that has ever caught a 40-pound barracuda in 2 foot of clear water on basically a trout rod, 10-pound test setup, and says that's not fun, I don't even want to talk to you anymore. So
So it's going to be the same thing. We're going to be casting shrimp to barracuda as well.
no, shrimp are too expensive and too important to be feeding to barracudas. So when we go after the barracudas, we're going to put our shrimp away. And something else I'll mention before we go, you can talk to somebody that knows more about fly fishing for bonefish to see what specific flies, but we fly fish for them and we jig fish for them with little small bonefish jigs. This is one of my favorite colors and sizes. It's like a 16th ounce overall jig or an 1/8 ounce overall jig is usually what we're using, a quarter on windy days, and just often tipping it with a little tiny square of shrimp or a little tiny shrimp tail threaded on to the hook, but a very small piece of shrimp just for a little bit of scent. And you can sight cast that to fish or muds, or you can just slow drift to flat and blind cast, lazy fish if you want to like that. It's no problem. You'll end up getting cut off by a lot of smaller cudas if you're blind casting a flat for bonefish, no matter what kind of bait or lure you're using. So that's one of the reasons that you don't want to do a whole lot of that. But sometimes you luck up and catch one that way. But switching back over to the barracuda, we're going to put our shrimp away, like I was saying, and we're going to grab some tube lures. Barracuda love to come eat other fish that you're pulling, but it happens on flat sometimes, specifically with bonefish. But they really eat a lot of needlefish and ballyhoo down there, and they like tube lures. And we usually throw these almost exclusively on the flats for them if we're using spin tackle. And there's a lot of different stuff you can do. You can throw big top waters for them. I like Rapala, any kind of big, larger 3-hook top dog style lure or walker works good for them. But you have to work that bait pretty aggressively, and you miss a lot more fish than you catch. And they're really nasty to handle in the boat with all those treble hooks on that plug. So just something to think about with that. But these tube lures work really great for them. And they allow, if you see where the hook is back here and how far up the swivel is, everything that's inside that tube is titanium wire, so they can't bite through that with those sharp teeth. But you can tie fluorocarbon directly to the swivel, because 9 times out of 10, those Cudas will hit this thing somewhere towards the back half of the bait. They won't get their teeth up above the swivel. So you can go fluorocarbon right to the swivel. I just use 20 or 25 pound, depending on the class of fish I'm in, and about 2 foot of that to the rod. And I like to use 10-pound braid because the most important thing for fishing those Cudas is being able to make long casts. So 10-pound braid on the spinning outfit, being able to make long casts with these tube lures. And all you got to do is send it as far away from the boat as you can and rip it back as fast as you can. If a fish comes after it, then pull it away even more aggressively. And he'll come. You can't wind faster than a barracuda can swim. He'll always come run it down. So that's a really fun way to fish for them. That's the way I like to fish for them. And you can usually deck a 30-pound fish in under 5 minutes on 10-pound braid. No problem.
I'm in. I'm signed up for both the bonefish and the barracuda. But hey, man, to go back to the fly, I should have asked when we were talking about bonefish. So if I have it in my mind that I want to come down and I want to catch a bonefish, a couple of bonefish on the fly, then realistically, I need to be able to fly cast how far?
You need to be able to cast 75 to 80 feet. You need to be able to double haul. And that is going to be what you need to do. And you need just accuracy and accuracy over distance, and accuracy in a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind over distance is usually, what you need. If you get a slick calm day, then um, it's that much harder to get close to the fish because they are that much more spooky. Some of the hardest days I've had flats fishing are when it is gin baby slick, calm and clear, and those fish will they'll see and feel you from 150 yards away, and it's just a chore to even get anywhere near them without them just going away from you. So if you have a calm day where you can cast easy without the wind, you still have to be able to cast a really long way. In truth, if you have a good presentation with the boat and you can get the boat where it needs to be in a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, that a lot of times will work out ideal to be able to present to that fish. But you need to be able to cast it 60 feet minimum, but 75 really is what I would say. So,
Man, I love sport fishing and what we've been talking about, but I also remember sort of our pre-show notes talking about that you'll also sort of break off towards the end of a trip and do a little bit of refishing just to put some fish in the boat that the clients can eat that night. Am I remembering correctly?
oh yeah, absolutely. Bonefish are definitely not good to eat. Cudas, the debate is out, but they have some ciguatara issues with eating too much barracuda down the further south you go, the more tropical regions that you're in. But they're not bad eating, especially if you prepare them right. But bonefish definitely are, and they're such a good sport fish. There's no reason to kill any bonefish. They need to be there for everybody to catch, and so it's all catch and release fishing when we're doing the barracudas and the bones. And a lot of times we'll catch a smaller mangrove snapper that just barely keep her, or every once in a while a redfish or a speckled trout around the edges of some of those flats. Usually not unless we're targeting those species, but we're not coming across a whole lot for the table when we're doing that flats fishing. So all we usually have to do is ride 5 to 15 minutes to a channel or an edge of the patch reef. But we do a lot of our fishing in the backwater channels and deeper mangrove creeks and cuts. And we catch dog snapper, mangrove snapper. We catch baby Goliath groupers. We catch big jack crevalles. I've caught permit, tarpon, snook, just about everything you can imagine in these mangrove creeks. And there's a lot of good eating fish, nice, good sized mangrove snappers, plenty of those. And they're one of the tastiest fish in the Florida Keys. So it's really nothing for us to go branch off for an hour and put a couple suppers for the snapper in the boat and catch, 5 or 6 other different species while we're doing it. And it's a good time.
All right, now I'm going to ask a couple of travel questions. So, in your opinion, the best way to get there, if I'm not driving, am I flying to Key West or am I flying to like Miami, Fort Lauderdale?
If you're not, if you're going to be staying for a while and you want to rent a car, then flying into Miami works out pretty good, or Fort Lauderdale. But if you're just going to be in town for the weekend or for a shorter stay, or you're not going to need to be that mobile, then flying into Key West is usually offers the most opportunities for wherever you're flying from. There's also a smaller airport in, excuse me, in Marathon. That's an option as well, but it might take a different connection. Usually Key West is where you'll be flying into. So Cudjoe, where we're at, it sits dead in between Key West and Marathon. So you can come in either way.
And what about a couple of recommendations for where to stay down there if I wanted to engage in this fishing trip?
Cudjoe Key has mostly all rentals on it. There is a lodge called the Sugarloaf Lodge that's about 10 minutes south of us towards Key West. That's a great place to stay. There's several good places on Stock Island. There's tons of bed and breakfasts and hotels in Key West. It's only 25 minutes from us. Same with Marathon. It's about 25 minutes from us. There's uh, limited lodging in the Florida Keys, so that's something that sometimes you can get lucky on Airbnbs and that sort of thing. But you have to usually explore all your options down there to find something that'll work out for you. You want to give yourself a little bit of time on that, just because of the limited availability.
And another travel question. I mean, I can't count on Adam Meyer, but I will probably hook some mangrove snapper. Is there some place where I can go where they cook your catch? I mean, and or any other. All right, let me reward myself with a nice dinner out. Following a good day of fishing.
Yeah, most restaurants down there will cook your fish if you bring it to them. A lot of them are good for that. We always like the outdoor eateries. Anything with the tiki hut is usually a good spot to stop. In Cudjoe, we've got the Square Grouper, and that's one of the best restaurants in the Florida Keys. So luckily, that's right around the corner from us. They've got a great spot there. Antonio's is a nice outdoor venue that's real close to us as well, going back to the east. And then Tavern in Town, just on the edge of Key West, is a really nice date spot. Good date night place. And then in Key West, there's tons and tons of bars and restaurants and every kind you can imagine. So you just gotta go explore and come fishing with me. I'll give you some intel on some real good spots to go to.
And I forgot to ask, if I'm a client on your boat, are you filleting those mangrove snapper for me, or any of my reef fish, or is that something that the restaurant, I'll imagine, will do?
Man, Gary, luckily for all my clients, one of the most enjoyable things that I do in my life is clean fish. It brings me peace and calming energy. So it's just as good for me as it is for everybody else. Unless I got 200 triggerfish to clean or something, I'm good with it. So I'll clean the fish for you. I'll make sure that you don't mamic them and have a bunch of bones in there and get like 2 pounds of fillets off of 15 snappers. So we'll hook you
All
up.
right, this final thoughts. I'm asking you for your final thoughts for our listeners, our viewers, on flats fishing the Keys for bonefish and cudas.
If you really want a good adrenaline rush, come down there and do this flats fishing. It's a lot of fun. There's also big tarpon fishing. There's Goliath grouper fishing. There's just the biggest variety of fish down in the Florida Keys. It's amazing. And two of the most consistent and fun targets on light tackle on the flats are the barracuda and the bonefish. And we see permit and tarpon on the flats too, and they get a little trickier. And there's different times of year where it's a little better, stronger for them. But uh, anytime you want to come down and get a really fun pull on light tackle, this is a great fishery. It's only growing, the number of fish that are down there on these flats, especially those two species, because they're not being harvested by anybody. They're not being commercially fished by anybody. So as long as their habitat remains prime and strong and the forage remains good there, then those keep getting better and better and better.
Man, you know what I ought to do? I ought to fly into Key West. I ought to come down and stay with you, and I ought to fish the flats for bonefish and cudas. I ought to do that. I ought to do it in late March.
Yeah, you should. I think that'd be a good idea. You might could even bring the Adam Meyer fella you're talking about there.
Yeah, he makes me look like a better angler. I like to fish with him.
Oh, and Billy's gonna be so upset because we didn't talk too much about fly fishing, but I think that Billy's takeaway could be that he needs to be able to cast further with his fly rod.
Yeah, man, that Tennessee stream fly fisherman ain't double hauling anything. But we'll let him tell you that when I say goodbye to you and transition over to him. Rob Koraly,
I need you to
always a
double
pleasure
haul in your
talking
sleep,
to you.
Billy.
Thank you so much, Rob.
All right, thanks, Gary. Have a good one, man. Appreciate you guys.
Billy Thorpe, what do you think of that episode?
Oh, well, I liked it a lot until you started trashing me out. But you know what? I can double haul because that's the first thing I learned when I moved to the coast. I knew that was the first thing I heard when I told somebody, I'm like, yeah, I want to fly fish here. They're like, dude, you got to learn how to double haul. And I'm like, what? And so I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. And I've been practicing forever to figure out. It's kind of like rubbing your head and patting your tummy or however you do, whatever it's called. I don't know. Whatever you make your kids do to make fun of them, that's what you got to do. Anyway.
Well, what would be your best takeaway from Rob's discussion of flats fish in the Keys?
Well, a couple things I really liked. One, I've never heard of anyone putting on bait on a fly before. So I was like, I don't know. I've never tried that for a little bit of scent. So like shrimp on the fly. So that was a pretty cool takeaway, even though you guys didn't talk about fly fishing more. Wah, wah, wah. And then the Barracuda, the tube lure for Barracuda, I've never seen one of those before. So kind of a cool something to go look up. And, you know, because I'm the kind of guy, like I like fishing gear. I don't use it, but I got it. Whatever.
Well, yeah, man, that was I love everything about sort of that day on the water, man, you know, from targeting a highly sought after fish like bonefish to saying, you know what, barracudas are fun too, to saying, you know what, let's catch something for the table. Like everything about it, man. What a good day. What a good day of fishing, good day down in the Keys. And, you know, I've known Rob forever, man. And I'm saying this to my listeners and viewers, even if you can't get down to Florida, then seek him out in Emerald Isle, Swansboro, because he's one of my favorite of all time to go fishing with.
Yeah. And don't go fishing with me or Adam Meyer, apparently, because we're not really that good at it.
I like people like you and Adam on the boat. I'll go fishing with you anytime.
All right, Gary. Well, I'll go fishing with you so you can feel better about yourself. I don't know if your ego is going to fit in this podcast episode. I might have to trim it down a little. All right, man. It's good to see you. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Marine Warehouse Center and Bland Landscaping Co. Also, I'll shout those guys out one more time. So really appreciate it, Gary.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Fisherman's Band.